It's great to see you all. I love that right now it smells like green tea, sawdust, and motor oil out here. It's like a really cool combination of days that people have had before coming into this, into this room. Thanks for being here. My name is Sean Beckett. I'm Program Director here at North Branch Nature Center. So first of all, there's tea in the kitchen. Feel free to help yourself to tea in the kitchen if you'd like at any time throughout the evening. And thank you to you all for making this series possible and everything that we do at North Branch Nature Center possible. If you are a member, thank you. If you are not yet a member, boy, I have ways for you to become a member. You can talk to me in the back, and if you'd like to make a donation, show your support, we certainly appreciate that. We are here for you, and the programs that we put together, we do because you asked for them and are things that we think that you'd like. So thanks for that. I also want to say thank you to our sponsors that make this whole Naturals Journeys series possible. So this year we have Catamount Solar, Hunger Mountain Co-op, Waite Heindel Environmental, Washington Electric Co-op, and Onion River Outdoors. How about a round of applause for our sponsors, please? Thank you, thank you, thank you. And then also we want to thank Lake Champlain Basin Program for basically supplying us with the grants that have enabled this entire river resilience series that we've been working on over the last 9 months now. So we are most of the way through our Naturals Journey series this year, but really our conversations around being healthy and engaged members of our watershed, this is a conversation that's been going on, well, for many of you, your entire lives, but in terms of this series at North Branch since the fall. We've had dozens of presentations and workshops and classes and things like this, really covering every angle we can think of in terms of like putting together a vision for what we as a community would like our relationship with the watershed and our rivers and our streams to look like into the future. So tonight is very much an extension of that. I was just thinking back of all the things that we've been talking about over the last few months, everything from channel alterations and dredging and things like that, to how beavers improve the landscape, to river fluvial geomorphology 101 and all the science that goes into that. We've talked about stormwater infrastructure and how that intersects with increased precipitation and climate change. And we've talked a whole lot about dams, usually in the context of removing them. And so tonight is actually a perfect way to add additional layers and nuance to the conversation around how we find a space for local hydropower in our portfolio and here in the watershed. When it comes to this sort of stuff we do here at North Branch, I find that we kind of push up against some kind of nuanced edges of things that seem on the surface like an easy conversation and then become a little bit more complex. And so rather than, we don't see our goal as to try to tell you how to think, but to expand the conversation and add new perspectives. I'm thinking back to Ali Kasiba's talk early on in this series, thinking about our forests and our headwater forests particularly as kind of like green reservoirs that are holding and storing and sinking stormwater before they come downtown to where our communities are. And yet, many of those forests are the places that we rely on to have, locally sourced wood products, right? So how do those two things fit together, right? We've been having lots of conversation around how to give rivers room to move, right? And how to let them reoccupy their floodplains and to do what they need to do when floodwaters come. And yet, our cities are where they are and where they have been for the last 200 years. And so, Montpelier is not getting up and moving somewhere else tomorrow. And so, how do those things fit together? And, and then today is, I think, a great way to extend this conversation, right? Dams, we know, are in some ways one of the most impactful alterations we can make to the health of a stream. And yet, small hydropower is really a huge element of decarbonizing our grid. And so how does the climate change story and the decarbonization story fit in with the reality of how hydropower impacts the river in other ways? So that's what tonight's about. And so go on this journey with us here as we kind of continue to think about this vision for how we want to be in our watershed as a community moving forward. So the plan for tonight is I'm going to introduce Charlie, Charlie's going to introduce Bob. Bob is going to introduce the film. We're going to watch the film. And then after that, we'll have lots of time for Q&A and a discussion and that sort of thing. I want to say hi to all the folks that are watching on the live stream right now. We'll do our best to repeat questions that we get from you all. But we also have a new microphone up here. And big thank you to Orca Media for recording this and making this possible. So anyway, welcome to folks in the live stream as well. Okay, so with that, so many of you in this room know Charlie Wanzer. He is one of the types of people. He told me to not say too much about him, so I'm going to. But many of you in the room know Charlie well because he is the type of person that brings people together and connects people. And it's really important to have people like that in a community, especially in a community of folks that care a lot about nature and the environment. Charlie's one of those folks that meets lots of people and says, oh, you and you and you need to be put in the same room to have a conversation. I don't know what it's going to be about, but whatever comes out of that emergent property is going to be greater than the sum of its parts, and something really interesting is going to happen. Tonight, this night is an example of that. A year ago, looking at the lineup for all of our workshops and that sort of thing around river resilience, Charlie said, you know what we need to do? We need to get these people into the room to have this conversation tonight. And so if you don't know Charlie, then I think tonight is a great example of the things that Charlie makes possible in our community. In addition to that, longtime science teacher at Twinfield and U32, and particularly pertinent to tonight, a longtime owner and operator and fusser with local hydropower station right here on the North Branch upstream. So we'll learn more about that, I'm sure, at some point here. So with that, help me welcome Charlie to welcome Bob.
Thanks, Sean. Hi, everybody. Great to see everybody here. A lot of familiar faces, a lot of people that I really deeply admire, a lot of really superior professionals here. It's great. So yes, we can mix it up here and have a little conversation. My treat tonight, I think, is bringing my dear friend Bob from neighboring New Hampshire over here to say hi to some Vermonters. And we have a little thing between us sometimes in terms of like talking about who's got the best state, Vermont. I'm the pro-Vermont, and he's like, well, we got Vermont beaten a number of ways. So he's a big New Hampshire fan, but we're buddies. And I'm going to share with you some of his bio because it's been really extraordinary. I know that some of you all have some really wonderful bios and have accomplished so much, but it's like, wow, the things that this guy has done are very impressive. So here we go. He lives in New Hampshire, and he's raised a family there with a couple of kids, and his partner is Annie Faulkner. Annie Faulkner happens to have some connections to Montpelier through some of the nonprofits, which I think will get mentioned here in a little bit, but that would be John Leibowitz's NEWT, or Northeast Wilderness Trust. Okay, so Bob's partner, Annie, has been and remains a big player in that organization. So it's like, this guy needs to come to Montpelier, and here he is, So let's see, Bob's many things. I've got 5 things listed here. He's an engineer, and he fixes the most obstinate of, troubled New England or Northeast hydro plants. Like when people give up on them, he'll kind of cruise in and just, lay into it with his problem-solving ability, his great mechanical skills, and his tenaciousness, and fix them, get them online, and then make some money from them. So he's owned a lot of power plants, too many for me to enumerate at this point, but he's been doing it for about 40 years. And his hydro skill would include, he's an expert welder, and he taught himself how to weld early on, and that is no task that's, that's not user-friendly. It's either you win over the steel or you get burned to pieces. And so this guy's an expert welder and a problem solver and a pour of concrete, and he'll program his computers, lay out and just design the whole thing from top to bottom. And then also in Keene and where these various, power plants kind of meet the other professionals, he's equally adept at working with lawyers and bankers and politicians. So I guess number 2 here I have is that he's a renewable energy impact activist. So not just hydro these days, but he's gone with a couple of big solar projects, and really, his heart's, besides well, I won't even say that he likes to dam rivers. He'll take the rivers that have been dammed by other people and work with them. But really, Bob's a major, environmentalist and conservationist and does so much in those fields besides fixing up the plants. So he's a renewable energy impact activist. He's also, as I've been saying to some people, a bit of a political operative. Like, I know a bunch of you folks, and I don't know, like, no one schmoozes the politicians and the high-level New Hampshire reps and senators and presidential candidates like Bob does. So it's like, wow, it's really fun. So it's neat to have Bob come across the state and see what's going on in our fair capital city, number 4 on my list is Bob's a tree hugger. So he's got lifelong eco-credentials, as I was saying, through Newt and his partner, Annie. He loves the White Mountains. He hikes the Sierras. Let's see. Yeah, I've got written down here that recently some of his his hydro winnings, like you fix a power plant, then you make electricity, then you do get in return some money. Hey, folks. Hi, Erica. Hi, Tassa. Yeah, and some of those monies have gone to, buy recently a nice, a really beautiful piece of land. So maybe we can ask about that, or that'll come up, or we shall see. I'm introducing my friend Bob. He and I went to middle school together and high school. And somewhere here I say, let's see. Did I say, yeah, Bob's been called upon by, one of the Western Hemisphere's leading environmentalists or conservationists who's no longer alive to come down there and join him in Chile and help, develop some of those hydro resources so that, Chile could have some renewable resources provided for some of the parks that are now kind of moving forward to introduce people to that part of the world. Let's see, we're almost there. I did maybe some of the stories that I told you in the classroom. They were about Bob. We traveled around the world a couple times together, and so I know that, Bob, he's great at skimping and improvising and finding the right part and the right secondhand scrapyard to kind of save the operation and make it go forward. Recently, Bob got a Alnoba. I'd never heard of Alnoba before, but if you Google it, ALNOBA, Alnoba, it's a family foundation, and they recognize and fund international projects and the people behind them and support them and recognize them. So Bob got recognized this last year for an Alnoba CEO kind of corporate leadership award, because he works, not just hydro. Like I was saying, he'll work with the people at the highest level down in Keene, or the highest level, in the political world. So, it's just my hope that Bob being here kind of excites us to work together. You'll see this movie. It's going to be, I think, pretty upbeat. We could ask Bob the motivation for, where'd the idea for the movie come from, and what's the purpose behind it. But I think in general, you'll see when it ends that you'll be like, let's kind of join the fight here a little bit. That'd be one thing. Like, we got Bob here to show us the movie, and the second thing would be, maybe just we can make note. I see a lot of people here, a number of people here know Bob quite well and work with him already. But if you're not you don't know him, hey, we can call him up sometime. But yeah, Bob's got some connections to we won't go through them, but so let's give a warm welcome to Bob, and we'll shoot this movie. All right. Yeah, very good.
He's my best friend, but he exaggerates. My wife beats me if I exaggerate, so I'm not going to do that. But I do want to expound a little bit on the international travels that Charlie and I have done over the years, because we saw a lot of amazing things and went to a lot of third world countries. But we also visited hydropower. So later, if the conversation wants to zoom out, like we toured a little tiny power plant being built in the Himalayas to power the province of Ladakh. And we toured a power plant in the Congo that the Italians were building for a local tribe there. And we toured the giant Tocantins dam on the Tucuruí River in the Amazon. So, you know, we can't get away from this stuff. Charlie is a very dear friend. He's been a wonderful public school teacher, as you all know, for 31 years. And now he's on the board of the Vermont Energy Education Program, which is fantastic. Charlie also helped me come out of my shell many years ago when I was very shy, and that's why I kind of sound like him. True story. I don't have a lot of hydro experience in Vermont proper, but I was reminded going through my files yesterday, a few things did happen. I had an interesting tete-a-tete with Ben and Jerry's way back in the 80s, trying to get them to use hydropower at a little dam where we had a license, and it was going to run their North Springfield processing plant. A lot of communications with Ben Cohen about that. The other thing, which I'd forgotten, is that I filed for the preliminary permit for the falls in downtown Middlebury, which I'm sure many of you know. It's a beautiful site, and it's supported hydropower for, you know, centuries. And Charlie first turned me on to it. And Charlie, I don't know if you remember this, but when I applied for the federal permit just to study it, you were my partner. And you, obviously being the more outspoken, you had some great quotes in the local Addison Independent when they talked to us. Again, this is February 1988. This is 38 years ago. And there's some nice old dilapidated ruins there, and Charlie and I have always loved exploring ruins. And so this is a quote of Charlie's. The roof is the roof of the old power plant. "I've sat many times on that roof watching those falls. I wouldn't want to see them dry," Wanzer said. "You know, we're not swindling businessmen. We're committed young men trying to improve the future of our community and our world." So, with that, I'll just quickly say that a couple people couldn't be here who I really wish could, and that is Matt Meyer-Bolton and Liz Meyer-Bolton, who were the producers and directors of this film you're about to see. It's a wonderful, very small, you know, family film shop in Keene, New Hampshire. They've done some work for the Northeast Wilderness Trust. They do a lot of nonprofit work, and they helped us put this film together called The Power of Water. With that, can we go with it? Yeah. Good. All right. Yep. Okay, I'm Bob King. Welcome to my home, which I share with my lovely wife, Annie. I love water. I love rivers. I love free-flowing wild rivers, and I love hydropower. I suppose it all started in China a few thousand years ago, when the first recorded uses of hydropower. But here in New England, it was, of course, a huge part of our industrial past. In fact, right here locally, in 1674, a man named Peter Evans was born in what is now Hinsdale, or perhaps Northfield, and he had a friend named Stephen Belden. Stephen was given a piece of land by the townspeople, and it says right in the deed that he could have this land for free, provided ye shall maintain a sufficient grist mill. Blew it. If ye shall build a sufficient grist mill and maintain it forever, and maintain it forever. And so Mr. Belden got together with his friend Peter Evans, and lo and behold, they built this grist mill, and they must have maintained it for a long time. Fast forward a few years to me when I was 11 years old, and after a big Thanksgiving meal, we went for a hike and stumbled on an abandoned hydroelectric power plant. Windows were blown out, the door was gone, there was nothing but the big iron carcass of a generator in there. To my mind, it just struck me as an incredible resource. I imagined what it must have done once to help light the community around it. Anyhow, it was only a few months later that the first oil embargo struck the United States, and all of a sudden everybody was talking about energy and the price of energy and the sources of future energy and whether it would be clean and renewable or remain fossil fuels. And, you know, to me, this just reminded me that, oh, small hydropower locally here in New England is part of the solution, a wonderful source of local energy. So there I was. I had it in mind that I wanted to own and operate my own hydroelectric power plant in New England, and I had no idea how to do this. I had no car, but I borrowed my parents' old Dodge Omni, and I found this list that was literally thousands of dams and abandoned hydro sites across New England. And of course, there was a time, not so long ago, when New England got almost all of its energy from hydroelectric power or hydropower. And I mean, this in itself blew my mind, and later I did do the research and came to realize this was true, that up until the mid-1940s, most of our electricity anyway came from hydropower. So sooner or later, I stumbled on a abandoned hydro plant in Northeast Connecticut that was for sale.
27-year-old Bob King is not about to give up on New England's natural energy resource.
Before everybody started talking about energy, it just seemed to me as a young person that hydroelectric power was clean and maybe cheap, and that there's plenty of it around, because all over New England we see lots of abandoned stations like this one.
Richard Rawson owns and operates a hydro plant in nearby Putnam, Connecticut.
What's happened here is simply amazing. I looked at this project about 6 years ago, and I shook my head and left. I didn't think it was even possible to utilize what was left here.
That's how I got started. I immediately got to work combing through junkyards and, you know, any source of material, turbines, generators, gearboxes, everything I needed. I didn't have a lot of money, and also I had recently traveled in Africa to places like the Congo and Mozambique, where I had seen how much people can do with so little money, so little capital, so little resources. And I figured if they can do it in Africa, certainly in Northeast Connecticut, I can find what I need to rebuild a power plant. And that was my philosophy, and that's what I did. And I had a lot of help from friends and family who would come down to the site on weekends. They would leave their clean, normal American jobs and come down and get covered with filth and bruises and scratches working for me at the power plant on weekends.
So my name is Annie Faulkner, and I'm married to Bob, and it's been quite an adventure. When I met Bob, he was working on his first plant in Mechanicsville, Connecticut. I had imagined, you know, cool little stone waterways and wooden water wheels, this sort of quaint New England scene, and when I got there, it was so much more impressive. It was concrete and steel and you know, big dangerous machines that could hurt you and high voltage. Bob himself was really impressive to me too. So much more than a wild, crazy engineer. He read a lot, he understood the multiple dimensions of our environmental and social crises, and he was really committed. So he lived in a crazy little room that he had built in the rafters of his power plant, and he lived there with his business partner Mitt and all the mice that got to enjoy their crumbs. And he did it with art and creativity and music. He would invite friends and family to come down and work and get dirty and then have a great party afterwards. So there were spinning turbines and strobe lights, and it was a little scary because you didn't want to hurt yourself.
In the process of all this, I got a little publicity, and eventually I was contacted by a wonderful family named the Taylors, and Lieutenant Colonel Warren H. Taylor was also a hydro fanatic, and he had heard about what I was doing, and he and his son Tim came down to visit me in Connecticut, and well, it became the start of a wonderful relationship, and Tim Taylor remains my business partner to this day.
Well, he was impressed by what you had done down in Mechanicsville, and he pretty much said, well, I can treat Bob like my son. Yeah. He's trustworthy, he's hardworking. He says, why don't we, the families, get together and start developing sites? The first unit in Acton, they'd got a log or a wicket gate right in the runner and ripped all the blades apart on the runner. And Bob found someone that had a die to make the curved blades.
Right. And you rigged up the die to your excavator bucket
to press them out.
We figured out how to cut the right size blade out of quarter-inch steel plate, heat it up red hot, put it in the die, and then smash it with the excavator bucket to form the perfect shape.
That's why, as I go along, I say, gee, that might be useful on a hydro, so I get it back, store it.
Whereas the American way is just to buy more stuff, and when you're done with it, throw it out. And that's the end of the life cycle. Whereas we are recycling equipment that's been around, 60, 70 years, some of it.
Yep.
And thereby
or the turbines that came out of Maine, which were 1910.
There you go. And then here we are generating zero carbon energy on top of that. So it's really, and I think this is what drives all of us, is the desire to make a contribution to this world and this country and this planet, that a different way to generate electricity, to build stuff, all of it we try to do with an eye towards the environmental impact and how to minimize it.
All right. So I got interested in hydropower through knowing Bob King. There was a river, and there was this high energy guy making electricity, and you could see that the electricity was leaving the building through insulated high voltage lines. And here he was producing electricity, which is, I think, sort of semi-magical in most of our minds, because how does it work? And where does it go? And what does it do on the way between here and there? The way it works is that somewhere out in your region, there's a spinning, essentially it looks like a big electric motor that's spinning, but it's being powered by something, in our case, by water. So we have a turbine inside, usually a pipe or a case, and the water's flowing through the turbine. The turbine, there's lots of different kinds, but they look always in some way kind of like a fan of some sort. And that turbine is attached to a generator which spins, and the generator produces electricity. So all you need is some way of spinning a generator. So you can spin a generator with a hydro turbine the way we do. You can spin it through a steam turbine, which can be run by a variety of sources like coal, natural gas, steam generated by a nuclear plant. You can spin it directly with a gas motor, like the little generators that you find, behind the market stalls in a farmer's market or on a construction site. So that makes the generation of electricity particularly interesting. There's so many ways to generate it. It's also notable, though, that you can't assume that it's a clean generation source. There's some incredibly bad sources out there, like dirty coal plants, for example. So the electricity then goes out through our transformer, and it's boosted up to high voltage because there's less resistance at high voltage, and it's sent wherever it needs to be sent, and eventually ends up going back through other transformers and into your house in a low voltage form, so it won't kill you if something goes wrong. And that powers everything in your house. So there's a physical connection between every generator that supplies your power in your region and the plug in your house. And the crazy thing about it is that electricity travels at near light speed. So the delay time between its generation and the time it arrives in your lamp, on our scale, is basically nil. It's essentially bottled sunlight. It's a form of energy that you can't see. You don't know that it's moving. There aren't any moving parts in a wire, and yet this force is moving through it. And it's really magical stuff, and very efficient as well, which makes it, I think, worth thinking about, worth knowing about.
So what we've got here is we got the dam that was built in 1836 out of wood. In the 1960s, it was filled with concrete, which is why it's still holds back water, but that's why it looks kind of funky, is because it's a wooden skeleton. I was asked, does every hydro plant need a power canal? And the answer is no, but this one has a canal so that it generates more head or drop. As the water gets further and further away from the dam, the river's going down and the canal isn't, which means the drop increases as you go. So the water comes down the canal, turns outside, goes right under where you people are, and just goes down into a giant, like 10-foot diameter pipe that slowly squeezes it down into a turbine, which is only about 8 feet around. And that's where the water goes through the turbine, shoots straight down, and in the process spins the wheel, which thereby spins a great big generator, which you will see. And the generator is what makes electricity. So it's really remarkably simple. And the water goes out the back and right back to the Westfield River. Folks, the reason I yanked out this book is because I have an essay in it that I wrote entitled Cap the Grid. And it's the basic concept that humans, we can't keep growing endlessly. You know, yes, let's build lots of solar and wind and even small hydro, but all of these have an environmental impact. And can we just figure out a way to stop getting bigger and bigger and bigger? That's kind of what this book is about, and that's part of what my life's work is about. And we need as much clean energy as we can get, especially if we can cap the grid and not keep needing more and more.
Andy K, take one.
There was a project out at Stanford University called the Uncommon Dialogue to bring together dam owners and environmentalists and river enthusiasts to talk about the future of hydropower and how it can be helpful in terms of clean, green energy to address the impact of climate change. All of these parties came together and came up with a framework for how to address the 90,000 dams that exist currently all across the United States. To remove some dams to let the rivers run freely, to retrofit some dams to provide clean, green energy, and to rehabilitate some dams that were a threat or are a threat to public safety. So Bob was involved with the hydropower owners and helped to set up a meeting here in New Hampshire on the Connecticut River at the Wilder Dam to bring together hydro owners, river enthusiasts, and environmentalists to talk about the introduction of the 21st Century Dams Act. With these dams, you don't need to address the same permitting obstacles that you might have creating brand new energy facilities. And we don't have that time, given what's happening to our climate already. We need to dramatically reduce our carbon footprint to address the impacts of climate change right now.
It's not a matter whether you're right or left. The main thing is common sense. Now, the problem we have with a lot of the conservatives is they think this global climate change is a bunch of hooey. Bob and I saw it firsthand with the site that we had out in New York, whereas we ended up with 3 floods in about an 8-year time, 2 of them 100-year floods and one a 500-year flood.
And that's the one that came through the windows of the power plant.
Yep.
And flooded our high voltage generators completely. Underwater, 2,400 volt generators. They didn't like that.
No.
And along with all the sewage from the local treatment plant that had there, so when we dug it out, it really smelled pretty sweet. When you start seeing that occur in just one location, you say something is wrong here. And you go back through the records and you see 30, 40 years in the past before they'd had anything similar to that. And you say, that's not right. I mean, the mill foundation that was there, that got washed, some of it away, was a mill building that'd been there for 100 years. And we're seeing floods that are taking it away, the foundation, and saying, it's not right.
The interesting thing today is that climate change, as far as how it affects hydropower, well, we are both part of the solution to climate change, being zero carbon energy, and we are in the crosshairs of climate change because of how the weather is changing. At one of our dams, we had already started to literally cut off the top of the dam, cut through 3-foot thick reinforced concrete with great big diamond saws, so that we could essentially create a larger water passage, a larger area for floodwaters to pass, because we knew that climate change was bringing more severe floods and more often. Lo and behold, in the midst of cutting the concrete blocks off, we had a flood. The river wasn't going to wait around for us to finish the job. Instead, the river lifted several 7-ton concrete blocks and threw them off the dam right onto our scaffolding. Basically reminded us that as climate change worsens, which it is doing, it'll become more destructive and more disruptions to ecosystems and people. And, this reminds us why we are even in this industry in the first place, which is to provide more clean energy.
So the climate crisis has a twin crisis, and it's mass extinction. So humans are causing the 6th mass extinction on planet Earth. Plants and animals and others are going extinct at a rate something like 1,000 times faster than normal. Populations of wildlife are crashing all over the world, and it's very scary, and it makes me very sad, because the complexity and the abundance of nature, of wild creatures on the planet, is a gift that is millions of years in the making, and we are destroying it, we are squandering it, and we can't really ever get it back. And of course, the extinction crisis and the climate crisis go hand in hand. Deforestation drives climate change, and climate change itself is driving extinction even faster. So the two are very much go together. So land conservation, for me, confronted multiple dimensions of the environmental crises. It required humility and restraint. It created wildlife habitat. I just loved having a lot of green on the map and a lot of places where there weren't tons of people and roads and logging. I'd spent a lot of time as a young person climbing and backpacking, so I think I just fell in love with big wild landscapes, and it was an opportunity to create that here. If humans could give back some of the earth to wild nature, there would be room for everything. We'd have room for wild rivers, we'd have room for wild open mountaintops, and we would be able to accept that some rivers are going to be dammed and some mountaintops are going to have wind farms on them. But we need to pull back and make sure there's room for wild nature.
So I think the challenges in front of us are quite clear if you step back and look a little bit at it. I'm 57 years old. When I was a kid, there were 3 billion people in the world. Now there are 8. And the world hasn't changed size. The atmosphere hasn't changed size. And yet we continue to produce more and more stuff. And we've just reached the point where we have to be careful. Figuring out where in the weave your interest lies and where you can fit in and how you can make a difference, even a small difference. That's really the challenge.
So I remember someone telling me a long time ago that optimism and pessimism were distractions, and that instead we should focus on hope, because hope is essential. Like, we're never going to get through this if we're not hopeful. That maybe what we're doing is actually going to make a difference, and we won't actually live long enough, any of us, to know whether what we're doing is making a big enough difference, but we still have to do it, because we're here, we got to do it.
The land conservation that you work on, and the clean energy that we work on, including our new solar project, all these things do make a difference. Do they make a difference fast enough and not at a large enough scale? Probably not. Yeah. But that's why we need more people jumping on the bandwagon and having the fun that we have, because let's face it, our work is fun on a good day. Sam and I love what we do, and we just get a kick out of working by beautiful rivers and seeing this amazing, very simple machinery, you know, so efficiently spin a kilowatt-hour meter and send electricity out into the grid. It's a wonderful sensation.
So looking into the future as much as we can, what I imagine is a future where the solutions are really interesting to be involved in. For example, when I was a kid, my father would talk to us about electric cars and tell us how great they were going to be. Now, my company car is an electric car. We plug it in at the hydro sites. It's better in every way than an internal combustion engine. It's simpler, quieter, more powerful, better, much cheaper to run. So the future can be exciting, and I think is very exciting. It's just the work itself is lots of fun.
What I imagine is a carbon-free energy portfolio here in New England and all across the country and around the world, frankly.
What I imagine is a New England landscape with wild forests in every town, and in between deep forests so big you can still get lost. I also imagine a human culture that looks at trees as homes for other beings, and old trees as the best carbon capture technology ever invented.
We need to imagine a world where we can stop thinking about unlimited growth as the end-all. Because in the end, if we can do that, a growing natural abundance, I think we will find actually more meaningful than the material abundance that we all seem to be after today.
I think about a year ago, Germany, for a short period of time in the middle of a windy day with sun, ran their whole country off of renewable power. I envision a day when the United States can do the same. Think about that. The entire nation running off of renewable power, even for a short period at first. It's possible. Other people have done it. I look forward to it. I hope it happens in my lifetime. In fact, I hope it happens in the next 10 years.
I love water, I love rivers, I love hydropower. And did you wonder what happened to that guy, Peter Evans, who was told to maintain the water mills there in the lower Ashwellet forever? Well, Peter had a son, Lieutenant John Evans, who with his wife Lydia had a son, Uriel, who had a son, Columbus, who had a son, John, who had a son, Careel, who had a son, Frederick, who with his wife Dorothy had a daughter, Elizabeth, who had a son, Robert, and that's me, Robert Evans King. So I'm still active maintaining the dams in the lower Ashwellet Basin 300 years later.
Matt, you could fall into a chasm, and I don't know if there was a railing around it yet, but it's like you just had to be careful, rocking out to strobe lights around spinning equipment.
All right. Well, thank you. So now's the time where we can take some of that food for thought and turn it into, what's our vision, right?
First, I need to ask, did anybody see the cameos of Charlie and his brother?
No.
You saw him from the back. He was actually in India at a boneyard for old steam locomotives, and that was Charlie sort of peering over that wreckage as the... And then your brother Mitt was shown opening a head gate at the Connecticut power plant. Yeah.
A few years back. Yeah.
So maybe we'll just open up to folks. You guys can take questions, and maybe I'll just be over here with a rudder, steering things if the storm comes.
Sure.
Folks have questions? Yeah.
So,
Yeah, Larry.
Yeah. My impression is that Vermont is not very friendly to dams, and so I'm curious about what you guys think is the future of hydropower here, or maybe Robbie, you have an opinion on this also, just because it seems like there are not any new dams being built in Vermont.
Right.
I would like to start by saying that, and Andy Shapiro can correct me, but in the crudest sense, it appears that Vermont has the highest percentage of hydropower in its electrical makeup of any New England state. And that's not likely to go away soon, and that's in part a lot of homegrown hydro, like Matt Rubin's plants and many others. And then, of course, a huge component is Hydro-Quebec. So you already have quite a bit.
So a big piece of it is hydro, right?
Hydro-Quebec,
Yeah.
yeah. But yeah, as far as any new hydro, you're always going to have the sort of lunatic zealots that find some old abandoned site and want to make it work. But as far as adding up to any real numbers, probably not much happening. The two big flood control dams in southern Vermont have already been developed for hydro, and I don't know if there are any others that haven't been. But yeah, not a lot in the future. But until we have some clean, limitless source of energy, I think the hydro you have is going to remain quite important for your renewable portfolio.
I'm curious, maybe, and Charlie, maybe you could expand on this. I'm curious about an extension of that. We have all these hydro plants that are currently in operation, but are becoming more derelict, and the consideration is, should they be decommissioned? And I feel like that's where a lot of the conversation is heading locally. As well, do we invest in these structures, or do we invest in the removal of them entirely? And anyway, I feel like that's where things are going. I'm curious if you can speak to that.
Right.
Like Green River.
The Green River Reservoir, right?
Yeah, it looks like Green River got a kind of a moment of reprieve for the next decade or so, per the Times Argus front page article today. I don't think they have the details worked out, but it looks like Morrisville Power and Light is going to continue to generate electricity there, and the canoeing that many of you folks might like to do is still going to be happening. So, what's the, is that a win for nature, or is that a win for humans? I don't know. I personally, I'd like to see that facility keep generating electricity here for the next 10 or 20 years until we get the climate thing figured out. But in terms of removing dams, yeah, I'm not opposed to taking out the dam in Plainfield, the Batchelder Dam there, which is kind of old. It's really pretty, but it's changing the course of the river, and that's not what nature would so desire. One last point here might be, the dam that I just sold. I've been running a power plant up on the North Branch for 18 years with my friend and neighbor Hobie Guyon. The plant was sold to us years ago by Bob. And we just sold it to another person. I don't think Damon's here. Damon, are you here? Yeah. Damon, there you are. All right. All right. So something that didn't happen in the transition from Hobie and me selling the plant to Damon is we didn't advertise to the local environmental organizations like, hey, you want to buy our dam and decommission it? And if you do, you're going to be, respectfully needing to perhaps match the financing that Damon is willing to come to the table with, is the analysis from, my business partner and I.
And to be clear, that's happening all over the country. Most recently on the Kennebec River in Maine, where Nature Conservancy has contracted to buy 4 operating hydros. So that does happen.
Yes.
But it takes big bucks, and it's usually big national players like TNC.
Right. And the benefits of removing the dams on the Kennebec would be tremendous in terms of the anadromous fish there. Right. Whereas removing the small dam up in Worcester might have much less environmental benefit, would be my guess. And we should keep running it for the great electricity that it provides. Andy, yeah?
You can tell me if this is too far in the weeds.
one of the issues with Morrisville Electric that's running the Green River Reservoir Dam is that they were required to maintain a certain amount of flow through the river, through the dam, and maintain a certain level in the reservoir, whereas how they had been operating it previously, and this is true of the Wrightsville Dam too, is that they could stack up the water and then generate when there was a peak demand on the electric grid, which is valuable environmentally and also financially because that's more expensive electricity. But now they're required not to do that so much anymore, and so the value to the owner has been going down because they can't do that peak demand reduction with the dams. I wonder if,
I mean, we could talk about that issue for hours. I mean, one reason that Hydro-Quebec is so valuable and has such a huge environmental impact is because it has gigantic reservoirs, aka batteries, and that they can dispatch them whenever they need to. They can turn on a unit and start, gushing out 5,000 cubic feet per second of water, at a moment's notice to meet our demands down here in New England. All these little projects that we own can't do that. We're called run of river. We can only use what's coming into our reservoir. And then there are the exceptions that you just referred to, and there are a few of those left that can still dispatch and turn on when they need to, particularly on the Connecticut River Moore Dam in Comerford. But yeah, on the one hand, that's really valuable, especially with more intermittent sources like wind and solar. On the other hand, it has more environmental impact because you're, turning the river on and off. So it's just, it's an ongoing tension that I don't think is easily resolved, except that I know in the relicensings that are happening on the Connecticut River main stem hydro dams, Connecticut River Conservancy is quite active, trying to get them to stop peaking. So operating only run of river. So, or operating modified run of river where you have a smaller band you can use in the reservoir, like 3 feet instead of 10 feet. There's a lot of nuance, but you raise a great point.
Some of the nuance is right upstream here on the Wrightsville Reservoir with our near and dear, wonderful Washington Electric Co-op. And we're lucky to have Steve Knowlton with us here. And so, Steve, you guys are trying to figure out how to run the hydro plants there in an ethical, environmental way, and also in a profitable way for the WEC co-op members.
Yes, that's true. And it is a challenge because it turns out to be, WEC is 100% renewable, so we get our power we purchase our power from lots of renewable sources. And since I've been on the board, running the dam has been, as a power plant, has provided some of our most expensive power beyond net metering. So, it's a challenge.
Right.
Matt Rubin, of course, knows a lot about it since he built the power plant there. But he's aware of the mechanical and legal challenges. To do what you say, what's been suggested is to change the way of operating the dam. To my understanding, it's going to go back and doing relicensing over again with the federal government. So it's not out of the question, but it's also my understanding is there's a bit of regulatory action that would have to, and community involvement for the reasons that you mentioned. Would have to be done.
Just to clarify, it's probably an amendment with FERC that you're talking about as opposed to a whole new license, unless the license is about to expire.
No, the license is not about to expire.
Yeah, so it's an amendment you're looking at.
We have to sharpen our legal pencils.
So just my partially informed opinion would be I would, on one hand, love to see WEC run the power plant, run the reservoir up there like a big battery and maybe stack up some water. And the flow down here would be a little bit reduced. And the North Branch Nature Center students would be out there wondering, like, where did all the bugs go? And the stream would be much reduced. And then, a couple hours later, they'd start realizing that, we need to step back because the water level of the river is coming up because WEC has kind of pulled the plug and is suddenly generating a lot of electricity that we need. I wonder if those costs aren't worth the benefit of getting electricity that's going to help, allow us to burn fewer fossil fuels.
You raise a good point, but it's a community decision, as you pointed out. There are lots of stakeholders involved in making decisions about the place where we live.
Right.
Yes.
So, do many dams have enough water held back from them that and have the ability to release that water when we find out, oh, yeah, we're going to get 9 inches of rain in 2 days?
I mean, it's a tough question. As far as small hydropower, which is what I do and Matt has done and a few others, generally not. I mean, we all do try to anticipate the heavy rains, and maybe, you know, within the bounds of what our license allows us to do, maybe we try to catch a little bit of that, but we can't do what they do out west or in Canada. Generally not. I mean, there are a few exceptions.
So the facilities that Bob is referring to, including the plant that I ran up in Worcester, are called run of the river. And you receive what nature gives you, and at the same rates, you run it through the turbine and generate some electricity and release it downstream at the same rate that water's coming in upstream, with the exception of maybe a little bit of regulated bypass. It needs to go through a special channel for the organisms.
So there isn't much water backed up. You don't have a big battery.
Don't have a lot of storage, typically.
Yeah.
I mean, I owned a plant for many years where we did have a huge battery, but it was licensed as run of river, and then we had to relicense it, because generally you have to do that every 40 years. And I proposed that we do sort of a modified storage where maybe we only use 5 feet of this great big reservoir. But even that drew the wrath of so many regulators and NGOs that we just quickly said, forget that, because we'll be studying it for 10 years before we can actually do anything. And it's too bad, because, you know, all the energy policy wonks in the capitals want us to have more storage to match wind and solar. So, you know, it looks like probably is what is going to happen is we're going to have an awful lot of batteries. I mean, that's lithium-ion batteries. Yeah. I mean, you know, hydrogen is not as efficient, and pumped storage is very hard to site, and conventional hydro with storage is just rare. So, like California's, you know, their tremendous success in renewable energy is using mostly batteries.
And how do batteries connect with hydro these days?
Well, not so much hydro, but we all know that wind and solar-based systems need storage, and I'm just saying that batteries are meeting the need for that storage in places like California and Australia, and, you know, places with a lot of wind and solar.
Mm-hmm.
So we started out with a grist mill here.
We saw a grist mill, didn't we?
And then,
or you mean in the movie or here on the creek?
Movie.
Okay.
And then Ben Franklin invented electricity. And I wonder if you could give us a little history lesson. What were the technology and political forces that said, oh, let's go make hydro dams, and we filled the woods with these little dams? And then what were the forces that caused them all to be abandoned?
Oh, what a great question. But can I only go back to 1882? Instead of all the way to Ben Franklin, because he's a little too theoretical for me. So in 1882, Thomas Edison, who had already been tinkering with some of Ben Franklin's, you know, discoveries, commissioned the first hydro dam, the hydroelectric power plant in this country on the Fox River in Appleton, Wisconsin.
So that's only like...
I know. My grandmother was born 6 years later. It's crazy. No, I was thinking that just yesterday. And so that was 1882. And that was direct current, by the way. And in the same year, Edison also commissioned the first sort of urban power plant at Pearl Street in New York City, which was a coal plant. A few years later, 1891, the first AC hydro plant was built in Telluride, and it's still running, right, Matt? In Telluride, Colorado. It's, you know, it's a National Historic Site. So that was really the beginning of the boom. Then around the turn of the century, you had the Great War of the Currents with Nikola Tesla, you know, promoting alternating current, backed by George Westinghouse.
For all those years, was it kind of unregulated cowboy technology, just build what you can?
Can't speak to that. And then on the other side of them, you had Edison and J.P. Morgan pushing direct current. They had the War of the Currents, you know, they electrocuted horses and all these horrible things. And of course, Tesla had the better technology, but he was not the most astute businessman, and he got steamrolled, and J.P. Morgan stole all the technology and took control of Niagara Falls, and that's when you really started having AC hydroelectric power dominating the economy. And then it just grew like crazy, and as we said in the film, you know, by the mid-40s, at least in New England, it was mostly hydropowered. Then, you know, you had World War II, and then you had a surge in demand, and you had cheap fossil fuels, and nobody thought much about climate change or anything else having to do with air quality. And so, yeah, coal and oil were being built to meet the growing demand. And for a time there, coal and oil power were so cheap that the hydros just couldn't get by at, you know, 2 or 3 cents a kilowatt hour. And I imagine starting with the smallest ones, but eventually even getting up into 5 and 10 megawatt size, they were just left by the utilities. And that happened.
So hydrocarbons killed them.
Yes, yes, cheap hydrocarbons with no externalities applied. Then Jimmy Carter, rest his soul, helped pass the Public Utility Regulatory Policies Act, which became law in 1978. And that unleashed this new hydro gold rush, particularly for small hydro. And it allowed people like Matt and me to build our little hydros and connect them to the grid and get paid the avoided cost for the energy, which at that time was decent. And it really triggered a huge renaissance in small hydro, where a lot of these old abandoned plants were repaired and put back online. Yep, 78 it all started. And then there were kind of waves. It would peter out for a while when the policy changed and when oil became cheap. And then it would come back. And it's been like that ever since, kind of cyclic. But I would have to say these days, most of the small hydro that is going to be redeveloped probably has been, again, except for some exceptions where you have a particularly zealous community or person who really wants to do a project. You still have quite a bit of untapped hydropower at big flood control dams. DOE estimates 12,000 megawatts. So that's about a little over half of New England's total demand. Could be, and I'm talking nationwide, by the way. So quite a bit of untapped potential at existing flood control dams. DOE also tells you there's 65,000 more megawatts untapped, but that includes places where there's never been a dam, and that ain't going to happen. So there's more hydro out there, but probably the untapped dams already built is where we're going to see some hydro still built. Why are we going to see it? Because hydro is bipartisan. Republicans like hydropower.
Any Republicans here?
Moving on.
Let me chime in and say that one of our local hydro developers is here, Matt Rubin. I don't know if you folks know him, but I heard firsthand from Matt's partner, John Warshaw, years ago with a school field trip at Winooski number 8 over near the Kubota dealership, describe like the battles that these guys did against the powers that be, the politicians and or the utilities to allow you folks to build these plants and sell your electricity. So the guys here.
Well, just a brief story. The dam that I own in East Montpelier was originally built to power the trolley cars that ran between Montpelier and Barry. And remember, downstream of the dam was an old coal plant, and it was demolished by Green Mountain Power 15 years ago because they used the space to store old transformers, and they had leaking toxic oil and so forth. But the reason the Cross Vermont Trail runs along the road out to the hydro site, and that was the railroad line that ran across Vermont and brought coal in to run the coal plant, which is right there near the Granite Street Bridge. And that's how Montpelier was powered. And then they ran the power line across to the Marshfield Dam to make peaking electricity for Montpelier. And the history of most of the hydro sites in Vermont, the one with the lane shops, where they invented the circular saw, only a 12-foot high dam that provided the electricity, the energy to run that. And just downstream of Wrightsville Dam, there was a sawmill and a dam down there. So a lot of Vermont was actually settled because of the existence of hydropower. And most of the hydro sites that are owned by municipal utilities were in fact the basis of the town. And then extended the power lines out to serve the surrounding farms. So hydropower really was the basis of the settlement. There are, on the Winooski River, there are 23 dams, on which I think, yeah,
You got it, 23. I don't think I have all 23 listed on this handout, Matt.
A lot of them are gone.
You know, some of them are washed out, but on the way out, you can get one of your souvenirs here. I couldn't kind of save myself from doing a little bit of a historical dive on some of these places. So some ruins are pictured and then some smaller places. Steve, apology to WEC, they're not listed here. Not everything's listed, but it kind of starts from the headwaters of the Winooski, the theme that Sean's been working on with North Branch the last many weeks. And as you go down the sheet and flip it to the back side, which is here, you know, the river gets bigger and bigger, and some of the facilities, the hydro facilities listed here, get bigger and bigger too. But yeah, they're all part of our collective history, which is kind of fun.
So Matt, I just want to follow up on something you said. The dam I referred to earlier that we owned near Keene with the big storage capability was also used to run the electric railways. And of course, this reminds us that back then, you know, electricity was used to do really good things and people really appreciated it. You know, now we're using it for almost useless AI search when you go to DuckDuckGo or Google, and for crypto. Like, what the hell are we doing, people? So, you know, with our electricity that we keep thinking we need more of. So that's just, just a minor point.
Your article, Cap the Grid, is on the table in the back too.
Thank you. Yeah, there's a book back there which Tom Butler here edited. Can I say that, Tom? A fantastic book about energy policy and energy use in the United States and around the world. And I have a brief essay in it in which I completely missed the boat on AI and crypto. But I'm in good company because ISO New England, which runs our entire grid here in New England, also missed the boat. Like, I read something just a few months ago where they said they had no idea the data center thing was coming, and that because of it, they've now asked FERC, the federal regulator, to let them update their estimates of how much power they need every 3 months, whereas it used to be like every 2 years. So, you know, even ISO New England is just saying, what the hell is going on?
You mentioned back to the dam. Several years ago, a bunch of us looked at actually putting hydropower in there. And we ran into a regulatory issue that it would raise the water level just a little bit the way the design was, and we weren't allowed to raise the water at all.
This is the Batchelder Dam in Plainfield?
Plainfield, yeah.
Yeah, I was right. I remember that a little bit, the attempt to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, I don't know, George, what was your position on that issue years ago? Were you pro development of the Plainfield Dam, or were you against it?
I think it wouldn't have been feasible in the end. I mean, you would have been trying to attach it to a stone dam, and I think I got a feeling that the machinery would have ripped the dam apart during the big flood that happened. Right. The forces on the stones of the dam would have been overwhelming. Right. Guessing.
Or the forces on the equipment.
Yeah. I mean, it's just a masonry dam.
Is it masonry or is it granite?
Masonry.
It's not.
Yeah.
It's not concrete.
That's not a concrete dam.
Granite.
Anyway, we didn't do it, and the study by the engineers says it cannot be rebuilt in any feasible way, and it should be deconstructed and removed.
All right.
That's great.
One thing I was hoping you this is reminding me of something I was hoping you could just both riff on a little bit here. There was something that was in the film saying, you know, this is hydropower is something that is part of the solution, and it's also something that is caught in the crosshairs of the same problem it's trying to solve. And it's also part of the problem at different scales, depending on how it's used and where it is. And so you have something that, depending on where you are in the scale and how you think about it, you know, we have something that the problems may accrue to the neighbor right downstream, but the benefits accrue to all of us, you know, in the community and across the world because of the decarbonization. On top of that, I'm thinking about, like, you know, so to do this work, you have to think really small. Like, I'm remembering Charlie telling me a story about watching a turtle trying to get up the side of the dam up there in Worcester and thinking, what can I do with the design of this dam to make so these turtles can better get across the top? And then meanwhile, you're like, how do we decarbonize the entire country? Right? and so, like, how do you hold both of those sides of the equation in this work. I think it's kind of unique to this.
Schizophrenia medication.
The turtle made it.
The turtle made it, yes.
No, it's tough. There's a lot to think about. I mean, there's just no easy solutions. I mean, for me, one way I sort of make it all make sense and reduce my minor hydro guilt, you know, for owning dams and blocking rivers, is that, as Charlie referenced in the intro, we sold a bunch of dams recently and put all the money into land conservation. And when we still had those dams, you know, every year we would make sure to make donations to the local land trusts to protect land in the watershed. I mean, that's just one very simple way to answer your extremely complex question.
I do. Yeah. I feel like there's a few things that we've done that are kind of crazy. One is we haven't bought enough electric cars these days, and I'm reminded of that when I drive someone else's just regular gas burner and I step on the brakes. That seems so primitive to me. Just that braking system. It's like, wow. And in 20 years, I want to think like, we really had cars that had brakes like that weren't regenerative. The other thing that I think about along this train of thought is that the grid, it seems pretty crazy that we've strung wires just across the nation, across the world. And maybe in 20 years or 30 years, we'll have a different type of grid system, and those wires will have disappeared, and we'll have a different aesthetic feel as we move around the landscape and don't have telephone poles and wires. And then the third and last thing that we've done that is like kind of incredible and might strike us as in the future as being preposterous is we've harnessed our rivers to the max, you know, around the world, especially here in New England. They've just gotten chock block developed, starting hundreds of years ago, with dams, and maybe in the future, maybe 100 years or 200 years down the road, we'll look back and say, can you believe what we did to the rivers? You know, we dammed them up. And then we developed new technologies to, you know, meet our needs, and we freed the rivers. So I think at this point, we're kind of at a little bit of a cusp where some rivers are getting freed up and other rivers still remain under our harness.
I would like to quote my old friend and business partner, Tom Tarpey, who you might remember, Matt, who's said to me, you know, Bob, you and I can get right out there with the environmentalists, with the jackhammers, taking our dams out once we get back to 350 parts per million. I mean, it's like, seriously, I mean, yeah, we feel like this is clean energy that we need today, and hopefully we don't need it forever because we have some other way, or we learn to really conserve energy and not waste it so much, which is the ultimate solution. So.
Breath.
I'm curious about the conversion factor. It's all solar based,
Right.
hydro and wind and
Bottled
solar.
sun, isn't that what he said in the film?
No, what hydro compared to direct solar power?
Far more efficient.
Or what?
Far more efficient. Hydro is generally 80% efficient because your turbine's 90 and your generator's 90, or better if they're bigger. And solar is, you know, we're just beginning to push like 22%.
Right. But
Is that your question?
I can't say. But it's reliant on several conversions to get it to, I mean, it's evaporation and rain and stuff coming down, and you're just changing that system all around. And gravity is really the thing. I'm just trying to figure out in my mind, you know, I understand the direct efficiency of pushing the turbine, but if you think about the whole system, I mean, the sun is everywhere and beaming down, and isn't there something more efficient about the direct action of going from the sun to electricity, essentially?
Does anybody here watch these horrible James Bond films? Well, I did. There's one called The Man with the Golden Gun, and it was done in 1974, and the whole theme is coming up with solar power that's like 98% efficient. Who would have thunk it, James Bond? But if we had that, then I'm with you. But and your question is borderline philosophical, and I'm an engineer, so I don't know if I can answer it.
Andy wants a shot at it over here.
Andy knows how to answer it.
I think the whole question of efficiency, relative efficiencies of different renewables technologies is a red herring. Really what you want to know is what does it cost you to get a kilowatt hour? And that can be a financial cost, or it can be an environmental cost, and it should be all of these costs, social costs, like the big dams in Quebec, when they go up and down, release mercury. I mean, there's all kinds of costs. And easily a dozen different parameters by which you can calculate cost for any given energy system. But the efficiency isn't really what we care about. We care about what are the impacts for what we do. And whether, and as I say, you can be a number of different impacts. It can just be dollars per kilowatt hour, or it could be pounds carbon per kilowatt hour, or any of these other environmental metrics. And the social metrics, and how do you compare these apples and oranges? So it gets to be very philosophical pretty quickly. But I think the efficiency piece, you want to optimize the efficiency, of course, of any system, but to compare the efficiency of a wind turbine to a solar panel, it's neither here nor there, really.
I mean, you can start talking about life cycle costs or embodied energy. How many resources and how much energy does it take to create the ultimate kilowatt hour that you're getting out of your solar panel versus your hydro turbine? There are many ways to dice it up. I mean, the problem with solar, of course, is to have it be a reliable system, you need batteries or storage, and those have their own sets of issues, right? So I'd rather answer it as an engineer and just tell you solar panels are not efficient. Yes.
Is there anything we can do to stop this AI madness?
I mean, I suspected somebody would ask that. Of course, I don't know, but just I do. I just think
the incredible amount of energy
it's
and
just
water.
absurd.
It's
I mean,
insane.
I would like to see regulations such that, number one, the search engines we all use. I use DuckDuckGo myself because I don't trust Google. If they're going to use AI, you should choose it. It shouldn't be the default. I mean, that's an obvious thing. Next thing, there should be a little carbon meter. When you do your search, it says you just emitted 5 pounds of carbon doing that ridiculous search that you could have just scrolled down and read the thing 2 things down, right? So, and thirdly would be to have not just a regulation, but a serious law that tells data centers that they have to come up with their own energy. Put the cost back on them and pay the externalities, if they're going to do it with coal, or, make them pay. But, these days, that's pretty far-fetched because of obvious reasons that we know about in the White House.
Larry, what you thinking? Then Andy.
What percentage of electricity in the United States comes from hydro?
In New England, it's on the order of 18%, including Hydro-Quebec. And nationwide, I think it's like 9%. It's highly variable by region. Washington State is 76%. I think California is second. And New York is maybe third or fourth because the St. Lawrence. But yeah, it's not a big number. And as I said earlier, there are some unpowered dams, existing dams that could be powered. It's not a big number, but it is dispatchable in all those big dams, so it's very important to the grid reliability.
Is California too, or Washington too, because the magnitude of their dams or the multitude of dams throughout this?
Primarily the magnitude.
Yeah.
My family and I toured Grand Coulee 2 summers ago. It's the largest power plant in the country. And the environmental devastation is just through the roof. And as an engineering and sort of energy structure, it's just mind-boggling. So absolutely gargantuan. And if you're into brutalist architecture, like you saw in the movie The Brutalist, Marcel Breuer, who really brought brutalism to this country from Hungary, designed power plant number 3 and the visitor center at Grand Coulee. So it's really cool to see.
Let's see, Andy had a comment, then we'll
Does everybody know what dispatchable means?
Dispatchable simply means that you have that storage, be it a battery or a big reservoir or a tank of oil or a tank of natural gas. And you can quickly turn on a generator like within minutes of when you need the power. That's dispatchable. Now, I read an argument recently as to why batteries are so great, even though they're expensive. They're dispatchable in 20 milliseconds, whereas a typical gas turbine takes 5 minutes to spin up. Hydro, depending on the size, a minute, 10 minutes, it's variable, but that's what dispatchable means.
Nuclear power plant, a day or a week?
No, nuclear is base load because it takes so long to ramp up the heat and the steam and then so long to tamp down the reaction. So it's base load and it kind of runs all the time.
Right.
So one conversation that we've been having here as a Central Vermont community is around floods and the future of flooding in our state. And every conversation we have around rivers or just life in general is underpinned by the 2023 and 2024 floods that we have here. Seems like a great opportunity for somebody who's our neighbor over in New Hampshire with a different menu of flooding disasters to think about and all of that. Want to ask you, like, in your work, how do you think about floods and increased precipitation on the viability of your dams, on the engineering of your dams? Like, how do you think about floods and high water and that sort of thing?
In the film I mentioned, we are getting really familiar with diamond saws. Seriously, we're cutting the tops of our dams off because of this exact issue. So, and as I said in the movie, one time we were doing it right in the middle of the operation. We had a flood, and it took these 7-ton blocks of concrete away that we just cut off like 2 days earlier. So yeah, we're making our dams shorter, and because you don't want to lose the head, which is that driving differential of water levels. After we cut the concrete off, maybe 3 or 4 feet, make the spillway lower, we add a set of pneumatically actuated gate panels. So you don't lose the head, but you now have the way to drop the top of the dam. You just drop the dam in 2 seconds. So that's how we're dealing with it.
Why is that beneficial to drop the level of the dam in a flood?
Oh, so you can pass more water through your site and yet keep the level lower than it would be otherwise.
It helps upstream but not downstream?
Correct. No, there's not. Again, these dams have no storage, so there's nothing you can do for downstream.
Lowering the height of it doesn't change the CFS flowing over it, it's just lowering the depth of the water upstream, right?
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, it might change the CFS, minute by minute, but not in any grand scale that's going to help anyone. No, it's just changing it upstream.
We have a few more minutes. If anyone has more questions.
Yeah, thinking about the Wrightsville Reservoir that's right up here, it obviously has a number of times saved Montpelier from being flooded a lot worse than it would have been. And I think there's some talk among people about actually lowering the level of Wrightsville, which would probably get in the way of the hydro potential, but could possibly give you more of a chance of surviving, a heart.
I think you've said it accurately, but you have 2 other experts here on Wrightsville.
Well, talk about it.
Well, that's a good question. I've asked our general manager from time to time, if a flood is impending, is there something we can do to lower the level of the dam before the flood?
When I first moved here in the late 70s, Wrightsville was lower than it is now.
That's correct.
And I never exactly understood why that changed and whether that was a beneficial change in the long run if we have another big flood event.
What was lower side?
I don't know the answer to that question.
The dam top or the spillway or the actual
pond level?
The actual level of it was lower.
The pond level was lower?
The pond, was that what you called the words?
The water level.
The pond level was lower.
The normal
I
pool
forget how
level.
much, but it was quite a bit.
Huh, I didn't know that.
Do you know how much difference there is between
That was before my time.
Okay.
No.
Not at all.
I know the answer. My partner, now deceased John Warshaw, and I were the guys who developed the Wrightsville Dam for electric generation. It was a consequence of an article by John McPhee.
Great article.
Right.
New York.
About hydro sites being developed in upstate New York as a consequence of the PURPA, Public Utility Regulation, said that because before then, the utilities had a monopoly. Right? They didn't build a dam and they could say, go to hell. Right? We don't have to buy your electricity. Right? And that was the end of the story. So in 1978, utilities did have to buy the electricity. So my partner and I saw that the Wrightsville Dam was potentially there. And there was a sawmill just downstream that had been abandoned. It was in foreclosure. Northfield Savings Bank. Yeah, that's the Northfield Bank. And so we bought the site, and then we discovered that the dam had actually been built with a tunnel through it for power generation. And then we discovered that there was a guy at Norwich, an engineering student, who had done a study about raising the level of the pond, the Wrightsville Dam, because in 1953, the Army Corps had decided that the dam ought to be raised and the current spillway built to protect Montpelier even more statistically from flooding. So when we added all that together, it became an economic project, and rather than develop it, those were the days when the prime rate of interest was 20%. The co-op could borrow money from the REA at 3%, I think. So we sold the project to the co-op, who built it, and they still own it. So the history of sites is interesting, but I don't know if you remember, it used to be the boat landing, right, was right on Route 12.
Yep.
And it was really muddy, and the water level was low, and then when the co-op and we built that dam, that's when they put in the beach and so forth, and a whole significant collaborative effort. So, yeah, the long and the short of it is that the standing level of the Wrightsville Dam is higher, and the co-op just relicensed it. And in the relicensing, the water level had to be lowered, and the amount of variability had to be reduced, because the state of Vermont wants to see run-of-river. They don't want to see fluctuating water levels for protecting the fisheries primarily, and benthic fauna, little critters that live and so, and mussels and all the other, and recreation, which is a significant criterion in relicensing. But yeah, but the statistics in terms of flood control are that the Wrightsville Dam is safe. Remember the bank on the corner of State and Main? We went in there and there was a plaque above the tellers that said the height of the water in 1928. It's like,
we've surpassed that, have we not?
no,
Not the 27, no.
Yeah, that's,
27, we're in the flood control dams.
Right, right.
Yeah, the Wrightsville Dam was built in 1933 as one of the first projects of the CCC. I think it was. Yeah.
I'm looking at the clock here, and I want to make sure that we can send folks home on time. But I want to thank you. I feel like we should have had you on the poster as a co-presenter here. Thank you. But I want to give Bob and Charlie the last word before we wrap things up here. So, I don't know if there's anything you want to put a fine point on or anything like that.
It's so nice to see everybody here, and hopefully you'll keep talking and make some connections. And it's great having Bob come across the state. Thanks so much, Bob. Good fun. Yeah. I do want to introduce you to the new owner of Worcester Hydro here before we depart.
Are you throwing us out, or can we stick around?
Oh, please, yeah, please stick around, chat, hang out.
We're going to stick around.
Good. Please feel free to. Otherwise, hang out, chat, get to know one another, and thank you very much to Bob and Charlie. All right. Thank you.